What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Point After Podcast. This is episode 9, and as you can see, we have a little bit of upgrades and two new things this week. Matthew finally got his camera working, so he has joined me over here. Over here. And we have our first special guest, longtime friend, football junkie, Mr. Cade Powell. How y'all guys doing tonight?
Pretty good, man. How about y'all?
Hey, doing great. It's good to be back.
Yeah,
Another week.
Finally got back on track last week, able to record both podcasts. Cade was supposed to join us last Monday or the week before maybe, but we had to postpone some things. And we're back now, and our first special guest, a couple of guys that will be joining us throughout the season and on into the spring, but glad that we finally got this working. So I'm excited, but we'll get on into it. And so this episode, we're talking about Week 10, the recapping it, and previewing a little bit of Week 11 and the college football playoff, and a game later on down the road, I think like Week 14 or 15 between Liberty and Coastal Carolina. But we're going to start off with Clemson Notre Dame, who finished in overtime last week. Notre Dame beat the number one Clemson Tigers by 7. If you didn't get to watch it, you missed a dang good football game. What were some of y'all's takeaways from that? What stood out to you, and what are y'all looking for out of Clemson for the rest of the year?
Go ahead, Cade.
Well, I guess the first thing I would say, if I'm saying it right, Uyangalele, I think I figured his name out eventually, but he lit it up way more than I expected. I didn't even realize finished with 439 yards. I wrote that down. Percentage was pretty good. He's like high 70s. I didn't really expect him to come in, I guess, and do that much. I expected him to be good. He's a 5-star, but that kind of shocked me. And I also noticed, didn't even hardly realize it during the game, but Travis Etienne finished with 28 yards on 18 carries. That is poor. That's really poor in a game like that.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of ETN, one thing I noticed was, right there at the end of the game, if y'all remember, I think he ran the ball and he ran out of bounds. And instead, he should have stayed in bounds because they could have let the play clock run down. And I thought, I was thinking about that, and I was like, they could have escaped with a win, I think, if that had happened, because they could have ran, 40 seconds off the clock. And I think Notre Dame scored with 22, 23 seconds left. Would have definitely been a lot closer if not.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of cases over the years where plays like that in the fourth quarter ultimately lead to teams losing, kind of like Georgia a couple years ago in the SEC Championship. I think it may have been 2014 where they caught that pass and then fell down the inbounds at the 3-yard line and didn't have enough time to get up and run another play.
Yeah.
But yeah, Kate, I think you made a good point with Travis Etienne. Was he finished with 28 yards, and what kind of shocked me on Twitter yesterday, I saw something where they were like, Travis Etienne has entered the Heisman conversation. And I was like, if he entered it after Saturday's game against Notre Dame, then something's messed up. Like, he should have been in it before, and then if anything, his stock would have went down. Ian Book, to me, played decent. He had 17 incompletions, but he did throw for 300 yards, had a QBR of 80, which was 10 points less than DJ. I still can't say his last name, so we're just going to refer to him as DJ. But yeah, I mean, it was a good game all around. Something to note, Clemson actually held Notre Dame scoreless in the third quarter, and then just wasn't able to quite pull it out. Is Trevor Lawrence back on Saturday? Do y'all know?
I know he was on the field the other day.
Yeah.
I don't really know how that's going to play out. I think he's supposed to be. I think his 2 weeks ended sometime early this week.
Yeah, I think they said the cardio test, wasn't it, that he had to pass? It was something because they let him on the sidelines.
Yeah.
But there was he had to pass some cardio tests, and that, I guess, I would assume this week he comes back, but Uyangalele, he played really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm glad you can say his last name. But I think it kind of showed us the importance of Trevor Lawrence on Clemson. I mean, obviously they wasn't the same team. But was it the week before, Matthew, when I sent you where they had a bunch of their starters out, or was that somebody else? Like or starters and 2 deep?
I don't think it was Clemson. But I could be wrong. I don't really remember.
I don't know. I know one team that was on upset alert last week was missing a lot more than just their starting quarterback, and I'm pretty sure it was Clemson. I don't know if the same was true last Saturday against Notre Dame, um, but nonetheless, how do y'all see this? I mean, we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but how do you see this impacting Notre Dame's chances and Clemson's chances to where they land in the college football playoff picture?
To me, I think Clemson's still going to be a playoff team. I don't know how it's going to work out for the ACC championship. I know both teams should finish out the season undefeated. Looking at their schedule, the toughest team for Notre Dame the next 4 games probably North Carolina, and then for Clemson, I'm going to say maybe Pittsburgh, Virginia Tech, one of those two. To me, I think Clemson's still going to be in the playoff. Bottom line, somehow, some way, they'll find their way in.
See, I agree with Matthew completely right there. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ACC is doing the thing where it's the top 2 winning percentages in the conference will rematch.
Yeah, I
And
think so.
if it holds anything true, what I see happening is they're going to match back up, and Clemson's going to be at full force. You're just not going to beat them twice. I think Clemson gets in the playoffs. Notre Dame, I'm not sure. If they lose that game, I don't really know what happens to them. I guess that's left up in the air still.
Jumping to number 2 is going to help their chance, if they lose that game, because I think, everybody always talks about the SEC runner-up being the 3 or 4 seed team typically. But I think this year you look at these 2 teams, clearly the best 2 in terms of who can be one loss going into the playoff. That's if Clemson wins.
Yeah, I think it helps that Notre Dame won just out of the sake that a 2-loss ACC runner-up probably was not going to make the playoffs. Whether Clemson lost to like Wake Forest or something, like just the 2-loss ACC runner-up don't really have a chance to make it compared to a 2-loss SEC runner-up, where, for instance, Georgia's only 2 losses are to Alabama. No, that's not the case now, obviously, but should that scenario had happened, I think you're talking about a completely different scenario. But we'll get away from the playoff talk because we're going to come back to that later when we talk about more than just the ACC. And we'll move on to, well, I guess we'll stay technically in the ACC, but we'll move to the latter half of the top 25 and bring in Liberty, who I believe improved to 7-0 on the week, or on the year last week, with a big win over Liberty. Malik Willis played really, really well to be a quote-unquote running back that can throw it. Auburn transfer. Has Malik Willis impressed y'all this year, or y'all think that Liberty's kind of just did enough to stay undefeated without really dominating any of their opponents?
To me, I mean, I think, Liberty's obviously a good team because they've won all these games. You don't just come in and compete like they have and be undefeated for no reason. I think they're a great team. I think they're a top 15 team as of right now. But Malik Willis, as far as I'm concerned, I didn't even really know much about him last year. And, now his name's on the radar in terms of one of the best players in the country, especially their conference.
Yeah, I've been pretty high on Liberty this year. They've been super fun to watch. I think Hugh Freeze is awesome. I think he's a really good coach at Liberty. Malik Willis, I think he's a competent thrower, and when he gets an open field, the dude can fly. I was stunned to see before the game that Virginia Tech was favored by 17 points to close in that game. I don't know where that came from. Liberty looks like they've been good all year. Virginia Tech, not so sure about that. That kind of shocked me just to see that.
Yeah, I noticed on last Sunday, I think Virginia Tech opened up as 16.5-point favorite, and then by Monday, when we recorded episode 7, it was down to like 14. I was afraid that it was going to keep dropping. But yeah, I didn't know it closed to 17. I thought the last time I saw it, it was at 14. But yeah, touching on what you said, Malik Willis is Liberty's leading rusher on the year. He's thrown for 1,300 yards. He's got 600 rushing. He's got a 12-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's been sacked 14 times, which is like 2 per game, so that's not too bad. But I don't know if you guys saw it. He had a dirty play in the backfield where he was about to get tackled, spun around the guy, and then threw it like 30, 40 yards downfield on a dot to the sideline inside the 5. Probably one of the best and most athletic quarterback plays I've seen all season. But yeah, I agree. I think Liberty's had a close game against Florida International, who's not good, where they only won by 2 points. This is Florida International, the same team that just lost to FCS Jacksonville State a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, I mean, like y'all said, I think Liberty is a good team. I don't think they're as good as Cincinnati, BYU, Coastal Carolina, or Marshall. I'd have to put them at the bottom of that pack, but I do see them being a top 20 team that could probably beat more ACC teams if they have the option to play them. I think, looking at their schedule, they finish with NC State in 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks later they play Coastal Carolina. So that could possibly be a battle of undefeateds, and we actually have that on here to talk about. So how do you guys see that one going? Are you more leaning towards Coastal Carolina winning that one, or I'll ask you this: do you think both teams will still be undefeated heading into that game in a month?
I definitely think Coastal Carolina will be undefeated. Looking at their schedule, you know, App State maybe the best. Troy may give them a little run, but ultimately I think Coastal's going to win the game. I think if both teams finish out undefeated, I think it'd be nice to see maybe a game day. I don't know too many big games last game of the year. It'd be nice to see something like that. But as far as these two teams, how they compare to each other right now, I think Coastal's the better team. I think they've proved it. I think they've got more athletes. Definitely by looking at stats, they've got the upper hand in that as well. So to me, I think Coastal's the better team.
Yeah, I'd agree with Matthew. I just pulled up. I was looking real quick to see who Coastal still had on their schedule. It kind of looks like both those teams would be undefeated, I would think. Still, Appalachian State is tough. That would be an interesting game, but Coastal Carolina is at home. But yeah, I would hope for something like game day at the end, because I think Coastal Carolina is a good, they're a sound football team. Liberty, their offense is really good. Their defense isn't bad, but I think Coastal Carolina is the better team of those two for sure.
Yeah, well, you were pulling up who Coastal Carolina finishes the year with. I was pulling up the overall slate for December 5th, and the only games that really stand out to me is Texas A&M and Auburn play, and then Indiana and Wisconsin play. But besides those, then I would hope Liberty and Coastal Carolina would be the stop for game day that week. I don't know if it'll happen, but I don't see another game really that could rival that. I mean, you got two top 25, two top 15 possibly teams that are both undefeated heading to the last week of the year. But yeah, I believe the win that kind of put Coastal Carolina on the map was the win over Arkansas State, if I'm not mistaken. Everyone kind of picked Arkansas State to win that one, and then Liberty beats them by 3 scores. Let's see, they beat them by 29, I believe. Yeah, beat them by 29 points, and then that kind of woke everybody up on Coastal Carolina, and then the ball started rolling for them. They beat Louisiana the next week, the Raging Cajuns, and then they've only given up 20 points in 3 weeks, or 20 points in the last 3 weeks in all 3 wins. So, yeah, Matthew, I think you said Troy may give them a little nudge this weekend, and App State could put them on upset alert. I don't see them losing, like Cade said. Liberty, they definitely have a tougher road, but I believe NC State's quarterback is still out. And besides that, they're not losing to Western Carolina or Massachusetts. So I think we're looking at a top 15 matchup between two undefeated teams on December 5th.
Yeah, I definitely think it'll be something that a lot of people would get into, especially as terms of like viewers, and then audience. I think it'd be a good one to see. I'd definitely be interested in, as far as Wisconsin, Indiana. Who knows how their seasons are going to play out? Right now, I think that's the best other top game on the schedule. But I'm definitely looking forward to this one. I hope both teams finish out the season undefeated, so we get to see that type of game.
Yeah, I'm excited for that game either way. I would say with Indiana right now, I don't know. Maybe they are kind of good. I'm not sure what's going on with them. But I do think that at the end of the season, I mean, at the very least, you could think that the winner of that game pushes possibly for a New Year's Six if the format stays the same with this, with COVID and all that stuff. But it'd be cool to see one of them in it, like a Western Michigan a few years ago. They probably won't win, but the winner of that, I'd like to see go to at least a bowl like that if they are defeated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. As far as I know, no New Year's Six bowls have been canceled. I think a couple other ones, smaller ones, have. They're like early December bowl games. But as far as I know, the later on bowls are still intact and still scheduled to be ran as normal. Um, Another New Year's Six matchup that I'd like to see if these two teams both run the table and then get cheated out of the playoff would be BYU and Cincinnati. I'd love to see those two teams somehow pair up in the Fiesta Bowl or something, Cotton Bowl maybe. I think that would be probably one of the best games all year between Desmond. Is it Ritter or Rodder?
I think it's Ritter.
Yeah,
I think
and
it's Ritter.
Zach Wilson, who top three graded quarterback in college football. Um, but before we get into that conversation, y'all touched on Indiana possibly being good. Michael Penix, is that his name? Penix? Yeah, so
Yeah,
I mean,
Penix.
he's impressed me. The Big Ten's actually had a plethora of quarterbacks that have looked good this year between Justin Fields, Graham Mertz before he got COVID hit him and he's out for 3 weeks. But yeah, I would say Penix is probably the quarterback that's impressed me most all season. And I've got Indiana in my top 10, but it'll be interesting to see how that pans out for Indiana and if they're still relevant as a Big Ten contender at that point in the season.
Yeah, Gage, if you remember, I told you last week, we both agreed, I believe, that Indiana would win that game. And I'm high on that train right now, I told you last week they looked sharp all 3 games so far. I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I think Indiana is awesome too. I like watching them. They've got a bunch of guys with crazy names. I know they got Freifogel, they got Wapfiler, that Hendershot guy. They have a bunch of odd names I noticed on their team, but they're super fun to watch. They get after it. Michael Penix is really good. Now, I mean, if you kind of look ahead to what they've got Big Ten East wise, they've already got Penn State and they've already got Michigan. So, I mean, really, it's just Ohio State. And I think that game's I would hope that's a big game. And I hope Indiana can. It looks like it'll be, in a couple weeks. So they got Michigan State this week and then Ohio State. And, I mean, that could be for a shot to go to the Big Ten title right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have Michigan State this week, which should be a cakewalk for them. But Matt, you are correct. We both did pick Indiana to win last week. And for those of you that don't know, I know our friends watching this probably know Cade is a big Nebraska fan, so he's hurting, but he would be considered the Big Ten expert out of this panel, where me and Matthew's more SEC, ACC guys. So Cade's more familiar with the Big Ten teams, and just throw that out there for those of you that don't really know. As you can see, his Kansas City hoodie over there. He's literally the tale of two different teams, where you have the defending Super Bowl champions followed by Nebraska, who sucks maybe. So
oh dude, we suck. We suck. You can't even get around it. It's depressing having to go watch Adrian Martinez on Saturday and then Sunday get to watch Patrick Mahomes. It doesn't make sense, but it sucks to watch the college one and then get to watch the Chiefs the next day. I'm about I think it's killing my dad. He can't take the losses no more, honestly. It's just too much on him.
Yeah. See, he just had a birthday recently too, so he's
He
getting on up
did,
there a little bit. So
50 now, 50.
yeah, if he keeps watching Nebraska football, he may not be with us too much longer.
He's got the Chiefs to balance it out, though.
Yeah,
Got the Chiefs, but that is it.
that's true. But yeah, so I touched on it a minute ago. We'll go ahead and kind of preview, and again, this goes back to the college football playoff outlook. If you had to pick a team right now between Cincy or BYU to get in at probably the 4 seed to the college football playoff, who are you taking and why? Cade, I'll start with you.
I would probably honestly take Cincinnati. I think it would be more fun, I think, to see BYU get in with their offense and Zach Wilson. But Cincinnati's defense is for real. They are super, super good. Luke Fickell, I don't know. I guess he's figured it out. Desmond Ritter, he can be like I watched that. I remember that Army game. He just seems a little shaky back in there because Army was leading early. But with that defense they've got, if they can just slow down BYU, they can beat BYU.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was about to say the same thing about their defense. Definitely the best part about their team, in terms of who can compete with, your typical Alabama, Clemson, those top teams, Ohio State. I definitely think Cincinnati's the best fit. Whereas, BYU is one of those teams that can come in and put up, 35, 40 points on a team like that easily. Definitely think Zach Wilson's capable of doing it to a team like Alabama. If we're being honest, whether they win the game or not, who knows? But ultimately, I think Cincinnati's the better team. I think they have the best chance of finishing undefeated. I know both teams' schedules are not really super tough, I guess you could say. Some good teams on there, but nothing that I think that should press them too much. But ultimately, I'm going with Cincinnati to be the better team.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Cincinnati's kind of blown out everybody they've played, and you could say that BYU's done the same. But to me, Cincinnati's just kind of played better quality opponents overall. BYU was the only real head-to-head match we could look at right now with comparing the teams would be Houston, where BYU beat Houston by 17, and then Cincinnati beat Houston last week by 28. Cincinnati's closest margin of victory was a 14-point win over Army, where BYU was supposed to play Army in week 2, and that game got postponed. So that's really the only game we have to look at to compare both these teams is the Houston win. BYU played Boise State last week and beat them by 34, who were ranked in the top 25, but that was only BYU's second game of the year, and it was their first game. Boise State. And it was their first game in about a month, I think.
Yeah.
It had been a while since Boise State had played, so really you're not even looking at the same team they were to start the year. And they also lost their starting quarterback, Blockmeyer, who was so good last year. So, I mean, I'd have to agree with you that I think Cincinnati is the better overall team, but I disagree with you, Matt, where I think that BYU probably has the easier route to go undefeated. They only have 2 games left, and they play North Alabama, who just moved up to FCS, and San Diego State. So I think BYU has the easier road, but I do agree with y'all where I think Cincinnati is probably the better team between the two.
Yes, Cincinnati's last 2 games are not going to be easy. They're clearly better than UCF and Temple, but at the same time, we've seen those 2 teams in the past give really good teams trouble and, potentially upset them. So I don't think it's going to be easy either way, but I think definitely BYU finishes undefeated. Right now I'm saying 80%, 85% Cincinnati will too. So, it's going to be a toss-up. It's going to depend really on who else wins, who else loses, and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, Cincinnati, like you said, Matthew, for sure. Their end of their schedule is that's not easy. UCF and Temple, those teams, they can definitely cause problems. But I do think Cincinnati's defense is for real, and I just feel like I don't see a reason they don't close out both those games and stay undefeated.
Yeah, Cincinnati's defense is definitely overlooked. I guess that's just because their offense is putting up so many points per game. But something that, we were talking about the topics that we were going to discuss today, a game that slipped my mind was Florida and Georgia. If you want to talk about offense, Florida's offense is pretty daggum dangerous. And on the flip side, Georgia's defense was exposed by Kyle Trask on Saturday. If y'all want to, we can talk about that one a little bit. Kyle Trask throws for 474 yards. Zamir White rushes for 107 yards in the loss. As I would say, a vast majority of experts picked Georgia to win that one. I think everything I looked at had Georgia as the favorite. And then Matt, I think me and you talked about it last week, where Florida. I think we both picked Florida with the upset.
yeah.
So I mean, I said at the beginning of the year I didn't think Georgia was a good team. I thought Florida. I think after their week 1 win over Ole Miss, or maybe their week 2, I said that Florida was a dark horse to win the SEC East. Not a lot of people bought into that. As you can tell, Georgia was still favored highly to win that game. How do y'all see both teams the rest of their seasons playing out? Like, do you see Georgia possibly just calling it a year and dropping out of the top 25? Do you see Florida losing another game? What do you expect out of these two teams to finish 2020?
To me, I think, we mentioned a couple of weeks ago after Texas A&M had beaten Florida, I said I think that was a fluke game, which, I mean that in terms of I think Florida's still for real. But, I take it back in the sense that Texas A&M has looked really good as well. But getting back on the Florida train here, to me, I told you at the beginning of the year after watching the first game, I was like, Kyle Trask and Pitts are going to be a problem. They've proved that. Now, I know he went down in a head-to-head collision, but I stopped watching the game probably mid-third, right after that had happened. Do y'all know if was that, an injury of any sort, anything like that?
They kept him out the rest of the game. I think. I don't think he played after that hit across the middle where he got destroyed. Him and that guy both hit each other. Yeah, I think they kept him out the rest of the game. I'm
Yeah,
pretty
they
sure.
probably kept him out for concussion protocol just to be safe. I'm gonna look up and see if there's anything about his status for Saturday. And then Matt, you can finish up, or Cade, you can give your thoughts. Either one.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say Florida. I didn't expect them to win the game. I thought that both teams could score, but I really thought Georgia would be able to move the ball a lot better than they could. Their quarterback situation is a mess. I guess that's an understatement. I kind of hoped Bennett was gonna figure something out, maybe, but no. Pretty much since that Alabama game, Georgia hasn't looked too scary, and their defense looked bad. I mean, Kyle Trask has played really well this year, though, in his defense. And Kyle Trask's defense, he's played well. Kyle Pitts might be, I mean, he won't get the Heisman talk, but I guess I can say that for later. I think Kyle Pitts is incredible, though.
I can't hear Matthew. Can you hear him, Cade?
Yeah, I can't
My
hear
fault.
him either.
My fault. I was on mute. Pretty much, I was just saying, to follow up what Cade said, I agree. Kyle Pitts may not be like a Heisman player, but in terms of that slot position, tight end position, he's definitely, I think, the best in the country. And Cade, I think you had tweeted, something about him if he's not drafted, whatever. But, I think he should definitely be the first tight end off the board. I mean,
I went out on a limb. I think I said Hall of Fame in my tweet, dude. Okay, he is 6'6", 242. He's a receiver. Yeah. He is so freakishly athletic. He'll be listed as a tight end, but you could draft him as a receiver, and I think he's incredible. I think he's going to be fine wherever he lands.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's like DK Metcalf, but it's listed as a tight end. So
he's 6'6" doing that. It's ridiculous.
But yeah, I can't find anything on Trask and his status. I don't know if they're going to play him on Saturday or what. But I will say, if they did keep him out for the rest of the game, there's not another quarterback listed that completed a pass for Florida. So I don't even know who they would put in to play on Saturday. But another injury we can look at is Stetson Bennett. Does anyone know his status for Saturday? Is he out or?
I'll try to look right here.
Off the top of my head, no, I don't know. I know that he did come back out of the tunnel and was throwing around on the sideline. As far as going back in, like I said, I kind of quit watching the game. I had a family birthday party I was attending, but Cade, you said earlier it's a mess. Especially if he's out. Are they going to put in who knows?
I think it would be. I would assume if he's out, it's going to be the kid who came in. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I have to look it up real quick.
Well, I'll tell you this.
See who that was.
Something I just found.
Yeah, Dwayne Mathis.
Yeah, that for Georgia. Yeah.
Did y'all know they brought in? Yeah.
Will Muschamp's son is a quarterback for Georgia?
Really?
I'm assuming it's his son. It's Jackson Muschamp. So, I'm assuming that's his son, but but yeah. So I don't know. I didn't finish watching the game. I started watching. I believe it was Liberty and Virginia Tech was going on at the same time as Florida and Georgia. So I watched the end of Liberty and VT instead of the end of Florida Georgia because that game was kind of out of reach. So I'm not sure who they're going to put in. I may have to go look at like the play-by-play or something. And
yeah, I remember I'd switched to it a bit, and I saw Dwayne Mathis come in, and he looked terrible, but I'd assume that's still who they go with. If Bennett can't play, then I didn't say anything else real quick though, but
you still have
Mathis.
You have JT Daniels on the bench too. Everybody kind of thought he was going to play. So
I think Georgia's season, kind of slowly falls apart. They could finish out with only 2 losses, but I think they do lose another one.
Yeah, I'm going to take a quick look at the rest of their schedule. They play Missouri, Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt. I think Missouri probably has a pretty good chance at beating them on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Mississippi State, I don't think Mississippi State will be able to beat the Georgia defense. They play at South Carolina where, let's see, South Carolina beat Auburn at home to beat the season, but that is a revenge game for Georgia where they lost last year to South Carolina. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. I do see Georgia possibly losing another game. It just kind of depends on how they approach the rest of the season, in my opinion.
I think Texas A&M is the only team as of right now that's kind of was considered a top 20, top 25 team like Tennessee and Texas A&M and the teams that have lost to Alabama that has managed to survive. And that's a conversation for here towards the end whenever we get to it. But Texas A&M is sitting in a very good spot right now.
Yeah, I mean, they beat Florida. I think they're at least the second best team in the SEC. I mean, it could be a fluke game type thing, but I mean, besides that loss they had early in the season, that team's in a great spot. And I think they're going to have a chance to finish the season with one loss, and that'll keep them in the hunt at least for whatever happens, I guess, towards the end. But
yeah, I mean Texas A&M's only loss is to Alabama, who's the number one team in the country right now. So I mean, you look at Texas A&M, and you're like, you kind of sleep on them a little bit because you're like, well, they didn't beat Alabama, they have a loss. They beat Florida, so I mean, Florida and Texas A&M are kind of on an even playing field here, where Florida has the only advantage over Texas A&M they have is they're going to make the SEC championship to play Alabama. Because I believe even if Alabama goes and loses to Auburn, maybe or lose to anybody in particular, they have the tiebreaker over Texas A&M. I'm pretty sure, so they would still get in the SEC West to face Florida.
I think A&M's only scenario is they have to beat Auburn and Alabama has to lose to Auburn. I think that would be their best chance of
I think
winning the West.
That would have to happen, and then it would probably come down to rankings, I think, how it happened a couple years ago. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I would personally rather see Alabama Texas A&M rematch than Alabama Florida. I think Texas A&M is a better team as a whole than Florida is, but I also see Alabama and Florida being an offensive shootout if it comes to that in the SEC championship. So
yeah, definitely agree. I don't think it'll be one of those games that it gets in favor of one team, super early. I definitely think it would come down to the last, 8 to 10 minutes or something like that.
I still think it's Bama's to lose in the SEC. I don't really see a reason. Even against A&M again, could be a tough game. I still think that team is just too good. Florida, the same thing. Their defense seems like they can give some points up. So I would say, yeah, A&M, I think probably level playing field. They could beat Florida. I still don't take that law that went away from them early in the season just because how Florida's been. I still think A&M could play a competitive game with them, but I still think there's a bar with those teams, and then Alabama at the top. I don't see any reason they don't be back in the playoffs again.
Yeah, that's kind of what we were talking about earlier this year with the ACC as well. Back when Miami was undefeated and North Carolina was still undefeated, we were like, there's a, like you said, there's a bar here for the tier 2 teams, and then Alabama's up here, Clemson's up here, Ohio State's up here. So I think that's what you're starting to see everywhere. It's kind of like you have the Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson, and then you have everybody else to round out the top 15, and then it's kind of everybody else in college football. So, but we can, while we're on the topic of it, we can go ahead and get into our top 10 and the college football playoff projections, and then get to the Heisman after that. So I'll start it off with my top 10. Starting with 10, working up. I've got Oregon, who picked up a win last week pretty convincingly. I was shocked by their quarterback. I thought they were going to play the Boston College transfer, but they went with another guy, I believe it was a freshman instead. Still able to get the win nonetheless. At number 9, I've got Indiana, who we kind of talked about earlier, who looks really good so far. Number 8, I have Florida. Number 7, I've got BYU. 6, I have Texas A&M, who we just spent a good time talking about. Number 5, I have Cincinnati. number 4 Notre Dame, 3 Clemson, 2 Ohio State, and 1 Alabama. So I've got Cincinnati over Texas A&M just because of their defense. I think they can put up points, and their defense could shut down Texas A&M enough to come out with a victory if you had to put them in a head-to-head matchup. We covered Cincinnati and BYU. And then I think if it came down to BYU and Texas A&M, I think it's the opposite. I think Texas A&M's defense could do enough to pick up a win over BYU. So, but that's my top 10. Anything you'll disagree with there, or maybe yours is similar?
I was trying to write it down real quick to see.
Yeah. So
For
Oregon.
me, I think the only thing I had different was I had Miami at 9 and Indiana at 10. And then I think the rest was the same outside of Oregon as yours. Yeah.
So I went with mine, top Alabama, 2 Ohio State, I think. 3 I'll give to Notre Dame just for the win. I still think 4, that's why I got Clemson. 4, I still think they match up again with a healthy Trevor Lawrence. That team beats them. 5, I did go A&M, and I have Cincy, I think, above Florida just for the moment right now. Just for the moment. I don't think it'll last because Florida will still get their chance to prove it the rest of the season.
Yep.
If they went out and they do their job, they'll be where they need to be. But Cincy right now, they're playing hot and they're kind of fun to watch. Then I go with BYU. I'll make sure. And then I take Miami out. I think Miami is a bit of a joke. I don't know. They haven't beaten anybody this season. They've had their game. They just kind of come off as frauds to me. So I think I got Oregon up there and Indiana just because they're 2 big wins this season. I think finished as my top 10.
Yeah, I'm not
It's
high
tough.
on
Yeah.
Miami either. So I think Miami's one of those teams that are kind of like Tennessee. Like every year they come in and they're hopped up, they're top 25. This is their year, and then they play that one good team, and you're like, yeah, this is no different than it's been the past 5 years. So
Exactly.
I agree with you. I think Miami's definitely overhopped. Indiana's a dark horse, if you will, to make a run at the Big Ten. They still have to go through Ohio State nonetheless, and then Oregon's the Pac-12 favorites, and USC did not look too hot. So I still think all roads lead to Oregon versus USC in the Pac championship, but I do think Oregon comes out on top when that happens.
Yeah, it's early to tell right now with Oregon, but I definitely think, in terms of Pac-12, they kind of separated themselves already, even with just one game.
Yeah, I think I agree going with what Matthew said right there. I was just thinking, I was like, the only way that Oregon even makes the playoffs, they need to go undefeated, and it needs to be blowouts in every single game. They don't need to have a close game. They can't afford it. A loss is out of the question. No one-loss Pac-12 team, they shouldn't even consider them. They're going to have to just, pretty much go on a tear and kill everybody. For me to even think about, I've got them behind BYU, Florida, Cincy, and A&M right now. They don't have a lot of chances to prove it, I guess is what I'm saying. So it better be impressive, or I don't think they have a shot no matter what.
Yeah,
Trying to pull up their schedule.
I agree with that. It's just I don't think until you have a Pac-12 team in any season, not just this year, I think they have to blow out everybody they play, or like they're never really going to be strongly considered. Because I think they play a 8-game conference schedule before non-conference in regular years.
Yeah, they only have 5 games left, I think.
Yeah.
That's it.
So I think like you look at 2021 or 2019 or whatever, in order for a team to be from the West Coast to be strongly considered for the college football playoff, you're going to have to schedule an SEC or ACC powerhouse. Like you're going to have to schedule Florida, Texas A&M, someone like that, and you're going to have to win, and you're going to have to win convincingly. Like, because obviously you're not going to schedule like North Carolina, Miami, and Texas A&M as your non-conference opponents. You're going to have those 2 weak FCS schools or lower group of 5. So you're going to have to pick a good team in a Power 5 conference and blow them out of the water. That's the only way you're even going to be taken serious as a top 4 team in the country.
Yeah, the Pac-12 is definitely not what it used to be. Stanford, UCLA, teams like that, even Washington. But as far as the playoff spot, I don't even know if they'll have a playoff team next year. It'd be tough to say.
Yeah, Pac-12 is they're a step behind the Big 12. I think the Big 12 is a mess too. Every year we put Oklahoma in the playoff and watch them get beat by 60, but nobody can seem to beat Oklahoma. Pac-12 is in a tough spot too, especially with 5 games left for Oregon. Yeah, and then it would be the Pac-12 title game. I mean, they play Washington State. Yeah, I don't see a way. They better be killing everybody just to even get looked at for this season. I don't think there's really a shot. Next year, again, for the Pac-12, I think you need to be undefeated. I think if you're going to go to the playoff from that conference, you better be undefeated because that one loss, if you just look at how the last few seasons have gone, there's only been about 2 teams worth anything in that Pac-12, and if you lose to one of them, no way.
Yeah, I think USC's finally for the first time. I think this is the first time in a long time where I've looked at USC and I'm like, okay, they're actually good this year. Like I don't want to say they're great like Florida, A&M, BYU, someone like that, but I do want to say they're a good team. But I think the Pac-12 kind of set themselves up for failure when they scheduled 6 games in a conference championship. Like, I mean, obviously I don't agree with them delaying the schedule or trying to cancel the season altogether. But when you look at it and they're like, it seems to me like they just kind of put something together so that they wouldn't be left out this year. And when they came out with the 6/7 game schedule, it just, I mean, everyone kind of knew right then, like there's no way they're going to be able to be a legit contender. And what's going to suck is when Oregon goes undefeated and they're setting as 7-0 Pac-12 champions and they're at like number 9. So that's going to be a good topic to talk about. But I think at that point you can make a good case for why Cincinnati, BYU, Florida, Indiana, all these other teams have a stronger case for the playoff than Oregon does.
Yeah, definitely agree with everything you said. It's kind of like everybody else is in a boat over here, and here's the Pac-12 kind of just waving from shore. So just kind of lost cause this season. I'm glad they got to play the games they're getting to play. But as far as competing for anything worthy of social media talk, so to say, they're not going to get it.
Yeah, I'd agree with you guys. They're way behind. I think that was a mess this season. I mean, you've got teams like Clemson. They're playing their 7th football game, and now you got Oregon with week 2 coming up, basically. They're already behind. It's not going to get any easier for them because with their number of games, it's got to be otherworldly for somebody to even get looked at, and I don't think they do. I'll be shocked if Oregon goes undefeated. I think they're the best team in the Pac-12, but it's the Pac-12. I could see them slipping up somewhere.
Yeah, the only thing the Pac-12 has going for them is this year doesn't count as eligibility towards anyone. So you look at Oregon, who their starting quarterback this year is a sophomore, who's a freshman last year behind Herbert, who last year he had as many touchdowns as incompletions. He threw 3 touchdowns and was 12 for 15 passing. So he's going to get 6 games, maybe 7 games under his belt this year, headed into his next 3 seasons where he's going to be a starter. I think that's going to help. Even if they were to slip up and lose a few games this fall, I think that's going to play good for them in the long run heading into 2021 and for the rest of that man's career. But keeping on man, I think you're muted again. I just saw where you were talking.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I was just saying, I kind of agree. A quarterback like that comes in as a sophomore. He's getting this year back, and then looking down the road the next 2 or 3 years, he could be one of those quarterbacks that slips up and finds himself in the Heisman race like Herbert did last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, but speaking of the Heisman race and good quarterbacks, we can migrate towards that. I think we can probably all agree that our top 3, top 4 are Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones, Justin Fields. If you have another outlier, throw them in there. But where would you rank those 3, 1, 2, 3, at this point in the season?
Let you go first, Cade.
Okay, I'd probably say right now, I mean, it's still early. I still want to see some stuff go out, but I would almost say that you could probably put your 1A, 1B. I'd probably still go with COVID, it obviously changed it too, but I'd probably put Mac Jones and Justin Fields up there. with each other. Trevor Lawrence he's right there, but with COVID, depending on how quick he comes back, if it's just this past week, then he definitely gets back in the conversation this week. Outside those top three, I've got Zach Wilson and Kyle Pitts have been my favorite players to watch outside of those three guys. But I do think it comes down, it's Fields, Mac Jones, or Trevor Lawrence that I think win it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Top two the same way. And I think I mentioned on recent weeks or recent episodes, Gage, that I think Justin Fields is probably going to be the winner. You can look at the Trevor Lawrence situation two ways. You can look at, well, it showed how much Clemson missed Trevor Lawrence, how much he impacts their team not being there this past week, and even really 2 weeks ago, which I thought was proved more in terms of how much they missed him than this past week. But then you can look at it as, hey, they only lost by, a touchdown in double overtime without Trevor Lawrence against the top now two team in the country. So as far as, the top two, I think it is Justin Fields and Mac Jones so far. I think, like Kyle Pitts, those guys you're talking about, Zach Wilson, and I don't think Najee Harris is somebody to keep his name out of the loop. I don't think he's going to be in the final three or whatever, but I do think he's worthy of staying in the talk for sure.
Yeah, I think this is a interesting year where I think you have the Heisman, you have the Maxwell, you have the Davey O'Brien, and you have the Walter Camp, who's basically in past it's been mostly all quarterbacks, which two of them are quarterbacks only. Sorry, I'm talking about Johnny Unitas. That would be quarterback only. So you have the Heisman, who's the best player, Maxwell, who's the best player again, the Walter Camp, who's player of the year, and then Davey O'Brien, who's quarterback. I think this is a year where you could see like Justin Fields take the Heisman, Trevor Lawrence take the Maxwell, and then Mac Jones or Zach Wilson take the Davey O'Brien or something like that, to where it's like you have three guys that are neck and neck and who's the best player in college football, but they're the best player in college football for different reasons, where Justin Fields just absolutely electric. Trevor Lawrence is the heart and soul of Clemson, and then you have Mac Jones and Zach Wilson, who are two of the most efficient quarterbacks in football right now.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, Matt. I do think Justin Fields ultimately at this point, with Trevor Lawrence missing 2 games, will put up the numbers to win the Heisman. I think Mac Jones kind of struggles in the aspect that I talked about this the other day. When Alabama gets in the red zone, they're not going to throw the football. They're going to try to give it to Devontae on first down, and they're just going to hand it off to Najee until he finds the end zone. So I believe it's the other against Tennessee. I think Najee had 3 touchdowns, Trey Sanders had 1, and Mac rushed for 1. So that's 5 rushing touchdowns. Where, like I said, Alabama's not going to get inside the 10-yard line and throw it unless it's 3rd and 10 or something like that. So I think that's going to prevent Mac Jones from winning the Heisman. But like I said, when you talk about in terms of efficiency, then you have to mention Mac Jones and Zach Wilson as 2 of the best quarterbacks in football.
Yeah, I think that'd be the case for most everybody around here. What we just said about the top players in the country, but as far as like you said, Gage electric, I think Justin Fields is like the guy that's kind of got that Kyler Murray type must watch Heisman player feel to him, and it's kind of hard to say because all these guys have great players around them, so it kind of makes somebody like Zach Wilson look that much better, but as far as I don't see much changing though, the Heisman finalists. I think it's going to be those 3 guys.
Yeah, I think it's those 3 too, and I think the Heisman this year is going to be like it normally is. The guys they're up there going to New York, they're going to be on the same teams that are in the playoff games, and I still think that's why it's Ohio State, it's Bama, it's Clemson. So it'll be one of those 3 guys. Overall winner probably would stick with you guys. I think it'd be Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence maybe when he gets back. Mac, I agree. They're going to – and it's not nothing wrong against Mac. It's just a system that he plays in. They're going to run the football, and they get in the red zone, and that's part of it. But, yeah, I would say just about like you guys, exactly.
Plus, I believe, like Alabama, all 3 of these teams are going to get their best game out of people, as far as teams they play the rest of the season. And I think, a game like Auburn, maybe even Arkansas, we mentioned that game, I think, last college football podcast. They're going to give Alabama their best game, so you could see somebody like Mac Jones struggling.
Yeah, I've got 2 things. One about Zach Wilson that you touched on with, the other three all have amazing 5-star recruits around them at wide receiver, or tight end, or running back, whatever it may be, where Zach Wilson doesn't necessarily have that. He may have one, but he definitely doesn't have 2 or 3 or 4, depending on the team you're referring to. And that kind of brings me back to Josh Allen a couple years ago when he was coming out and they were doing his draft grades and stuff. A lot of people were talking about him not looking good at Wyoming, and kind of sleeping on him for that. But then he gets in the NFL and you see what he's doing this year with the Buffalo Bills and what he did towards the end of last season. So I think that's a good comparison for Zach Wilson in the sense that his numbers look even better because of what he's working with. But you were talking about Arkansas. Arkansas, Cade, you'll find this interesting, are 17.5-point underdogs to Florida right now. I think I saw that and I about bet the house like right then. Like I was like, there ain't no way. So
yeah, I would lean that. I got that wrote down right here. I would lean that to start off with. Florida's defense, after a huge win, especially them coming into it, it could be a little lazy. I think Arkansas plus 17 would be, because I mean they seem like they can score. You got Felipe Franks too. Is he still starting with Arkansas? Pretty sure he is.
As far as I know.
Okay,
yeah.
to make sure. Yes, I thought he had been, but yeah, that'll be interesting. I wouldn't give Florida 3 touchdowns, especially after the big win last week. No way.
So, any other Heisman talk or Player of the Year talk we want to get out here before we get on to Week 11 predictions?
I think that's it. You mentioned some. I think there's UCF quarterback in terms of stats, but I think that's the only other guy I know of that we've talked about in the last 3 weeks at least.
Yeah, Dylan Gabriel, he has been playing good,
Yeah.
but I would say Nebraska, if we're going to have a new starting quarterback this week, it's not going to be Adrian. It's not going to be Adrian this time.
Yeah, I know you're pumped about that.
We'll see.
So Matthew, to give you an update on that, last time we talked, it was Dylan Gabriel leading the NCAA in like every category. Right now, we got Shane Buechele in completions and attempts, Justin Fields in completion percentage, Buechele in yards, followed by Zach Wilson and Dylan Gabriel. Let's see, yards per attempt is Caleb Ellaby from Western Michigan. Passing yards per attempt to Justin is still Caleb Ellaby. Passing touchdowns is Kyle Trask, Sam Ehlinger, and Brady White. Sorry. And then the interception leader is Chase Bryce from Duke, followed by KJ Costello from Mississippi State, which I think that's very expected your first year in the air raid.
Yeah,
that's not Mike Leach's guy. They've been a mess to watch.
Yeah, that's what I said a couple weeks ago. I was like, first off, respect the raid, but second off, you're gonna have to wait till Mike Leach gets his guy in there. Like your first year in the air raid is rough, especially being a quarterback. But I think once he gets his guy and is able to have at least a spring training with him, a full fall camp. I know this year was abbreviated, so once these things are back to normal and he's able to actually groom his guy, I think the air raid at Mississippi State is going to be very fun to watch in the SEC.
Oh, yeah, I'm pumped to watch
definitely agree.
Yeah, so we'll get into our last segment, the Week 11 preview. We got a couple games wrote down that we're going to talk about. I'm eyeing the schedule right now. I don't really see any others worth mentioning. We kind of touched on Georgia, Missouri earlier. Coastal Carolina plays at Troy. Virginia Tech and Miami, I think that would be a good game. We all touched on Miami being overrated and haven't beat anybody. Virginia Tech coming off a tough loss against Liberty. So I think that game will be fun. But we'll start off with the home team, Nebraska versus Penn State. The battle of, I believe both teams are 0-3.
We're 0-3
and 0-2. Yeah, so not terrible. But yeah, so Cade, I'll start with you. How do you see this game going? You touched on a new quarterback, not Adrian Martinez. Are the Cornhuskers able to pick up their first win?
We're at home. I am going to be excited to see that. We at least got a home game to do this. Luke will be playing, so I'm not really sure what to expect there. But I hope we're competitive more than anything. But I'll be honest, we suck. We are not a good team. Our run defense has been pretty good this year. I can't really complain with that. Pass defense, I mean, y'all probably saw us against Ohio State. Justin Fields was like 21 of 22 at the end of that game. We gave up everything underneath. I think we just kind of realized that our guys couldn't play. We couldn't play man one-on-one with that Ohio State team. I would say I think we keep it close, but I do think we end up losing that game. That offense was rough last week. We can run the ball pretty well with Dedrick Mills and Marvin Scott and stuff, but the second we try to get outside like what we're capable of doing, it can get out of hand. And I don't think the offense will be ready with week 1 Luke starting. So I don't know. I'd say we probably lose by a touchdown or so. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I don't differ much from that. I was going to say, this could be a situation where in your hopes that, new quarterback comes in, gives a spark to the offense, and, Penn State's a team that was predicted to be so good and then starting out 0-2, so they might be down on themselves. Or, this could be a game where they're like, hey, we've had enough, come in and make a statement win. So, but ultimately, I think it's a close game. I think both teams are itching for that first win. It's going to show. But, at the end of the day, I think Penn State wins by less than 5.
Yeah, Penn State's 3.5-point favorite. The biggest concern for me all season has been Penn State turning the ball over. He's got 5 interceptions. I think they turned the ball over 3 or 4 times in that first game against Indiana. Now, don't get me wrong, Indiana's a really good team, but I still think Penn State kind of gave them the game, and then that kind of it all kind of snowballed and went downhill from there. I think if they win that game, they're 2-1 with the obvious loss to Ohio State. But so for me, I think if Penn State can take care of the football and not turn the ball over, then I do agree. I think they take the win over Nebraska. I think it'll be a close game, like late low 30s, high 20s, somewhere in there. I think Penn State covers, but I do see it being very, very close and probably going down to the fourth quarter, down to the wire.
I'd probably just add one more thing. You brought up the fumbles, Gage, with Penn State, the turnovers and stuff like that. That's interesting. Only thing I would add to it, I'm pretty sure the stat still stands, but Nebraska has more fumbles the last 2 years than any team in college football. So, it's ridiculously turnover prone. I think Luke fumbled twice last week, and he fumbled 2 times against Ohio State as well. Adrian, whenever he plays, he'll probably fumble too. It's just that's kind of what I feel like with Nebraska. We just shoot ourselves in the foot with so many mistakes throughout a football game that it's tough to win. But I think we're all consensus Penn State probably covers that game, or at least close.
Yeah, me and Matt were talking a couple weeks ago how we're kind of spoiled being Alabama fans. Like, Saban's been there for 12, 13 years. So, I mean, the majority of us actually understanding and enjoying football, we've got the good side of things, but who knows how long it'll stay this way.
Yeah, it won't last forever.
Right.
So.
But we'll stay, on the topic of the Big Ten. We'll get into Wisconsin and Michigan. That game is still on as of now, I believe, with Wisconsin missing 2 games in a row due to COVID. And then we got
as of this morning, yeah.
Yeah, Auburn LSU out this weekend. Auburn out this weekend. Alabama LSU possibly out this weekend. So we're hoping this game doesn't get canceled. Wisconsin at Michigan. Wisconsin, who I believe is without Mertz. He should come back next week, given negative test. And then Michigan, who is struggled, just lost to Michigan State, lost again last week to Indiana. I think this is a game of Michigan, who isn't really that good, versus Wisconsin, where they haven't played a game in 2 weeks. They're missing their starting quarterback. I don't feel confident in saying this, but I will say I think Michigan wins this one just because they're kind of due for a win, and you don't really know what to expect with Wisconsin. I think if Mertz was playing, I like him. I like Wisconsin to win the game, but for the reason that they haven't played in 2 weeks and they're missing their starting quarterback, I'm going to go with the Big Blue to win this one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was going to say, I think coming into this game, I think Jim Harbaugh is going to take advantage of Graham Mertz, who, after his first game performance, I was like, man, I'm excited to see this guy play. Then, bam, COVID puts him on the sideline for a couple of weeks. But I think this is one of those games that Jim Harbaugh is like, it's a must win, especially for the program. Like coming off the loss last week. We don't really know how great Indiana is, so you can't really say, how much that win meant to Indiana. But as far as Michigan's standpoint, I think this is one of those games that they know, the coaches know, the team knows that, hey, we have to win this football game.
Yeah, I agree with what Matt said. Jim Harbaugh's got to win this one. If he doesn't win this one, he is in a real chance of possibly getting fired this season. And especially with Wisconsin with no Mertz, you can't lose that football game. Although it's Wisconsin, I could absolutely see Wisconsin beating them. There's just every year with that team, you can't. I mean, you know how they're going to be. They're going to be good at defense, and they're going to try to run the football. If they can do that with them, then they can beat Michigan. But Harbaugh, he cannot lose that game. He cannot.
No.
Yeah, I think something we can all touch on just real quick. Who's on the hottest hot seat, Gus, Tom Herman, or Harbaugh?
Gus.
Yeah, I was going to say it's kind of toss up between Harbaugh and Gus, just in terms of what those teams mean to college football and where they usually compete at. But I think Gus Malzahn is a lot. I think right now you look at the Alabama game. I think Auburn plays good. I think Alabama wins that game as they should. But I think if Auburn finds themselves losing another game that everybody expects them to win, I think I think you could see the buyout happening.
Yeah, I agree. The only reason I'm picking Gus over Jim is because, like you said, it kind of comes down to the rivalry game where Gus is able to get wins over Alabama, where Harbaugh has lost like 10 in a row against Ohio State, and we all know when it comes down to that, if you can't beat your rival, then you're not going to stick around no matter what school you're at. So yeah, we'll move on to. We'll go to the Pac-12 right now. We got Oregon and Washington State. Washington State, for the first time in I don't know how many games last week, probably years, had more rushing yards than passing yards. I think they had 237 to like 231 or something like that. It was very close, but they did have more rushing yards than passing for the first time since Mike Leach has been there. Going up against number 11 Oregon, who we spent a lot of time talking about a minute ago, favored to win the Pac-12. How do y'all see that game playing out?
I think this is Oregon's game, no problem. Like we said, if they have just the slightest chance of, even making the top five, breaking the top five, they have to significantly win their games by a lot of points. I think if we know that, they know that. So I think Oregon handles this game I think they handle it early, and I think they just control it the whole game.
Yeah, I'd agree with Matt. I think Oregon is a good team. I think they've got a good defense. I don't see any reason that they can't. I think I wrote it down. It's sitting at 9, I think was the last I saw. I would think that there's no reason they're not 2 touchdowns in that game. Washington State, they're going through that main issue of trying to shift their entire play style. They're not doing their air raid anymore. And Oregon's defense has been good, honestly, the last couple of years. I don't really have any reason to think that they can't do what they got to do against Washington State.
Yeah, I agree. I like Oregon. I like Oregon by 2 or 3 scores. It's a 6 o'clock kickoff. I think that's going to kind of help out to where last week you saw USC get off to a slow start. On the contrary to that, USC has another 9 a.m. kickoff this week, so I think they'll be more prepared. But going back to Oregon, I think Oregon playing a late game last week, a late game this week is going to help them being in the right mindset, knowing how to prepare, given that they waited till almost the season being over before they started playing. So yeah, I agree. I think Oregon picks up the win this week over Washington State, and to fact check what I said earlier, it was 229 to 227 rushing the pass yards last week. So maybe that's the new look Washington State Cougars that we can get used to in the Pac-12. So the board picks unanimous Oregon. We'll finish up with the SEC. We'll start with South Carolina and Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin versus Will Muschamp. I think that game's going to be a little closer than what most people would expect. I think South Carolina puts up 3 or 4 scores, but I think Ole Miss's offense is just too good at this point. I think they put up probably 40 plus. I'm thinking like maybe 41-28 Ole Miss, somewhere in there. I'm not sure what the line is, but I'm going to take Ole Miss to win that one just because their offense is able to score points pretty much at will.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Ole Miss wins this one pretty easily. I think they put up a lot of points early and just kind of it's just one of those games where South Carolina may score a touchdown or 2 or 10 points, kind of get themselves close, and Ole Miss will score 2, touchdowns right off after that. So I think it's one of those games, just a typical Ole Miss game that we've seen so far this year. But I don't see their offense struggling any against South Carolina.
I don't think the offense is struggle. I was just looking to see if they had the over-under posted yet, because I think that game, you're probably looking at somewhere around 60, 70, maybe even 80 total points. I think both teams can score. Ole Miss's defense doesn't seem like anything that I'd worry about. With it being 11, I don't know. I'm trying to decide. I would honestly probably say gut feeling right now, I think that South Carolina can keep it within 11. So I would think South Carolina can play and just keep it reasonably close. I don't think Ole Miss's defense is anything to write home about. They can score, though. They can score really quickly.
I'm gonna go opposite of you. I think with it being at 11, I think Ole Miss is able to win by 2 touchdowns rather than 2 scores. I'm going with 2 touchdowns. I think Ole Miss wins it by 13, 14 plus. If that spread was a little higher, I'd probably take the under, but with it being 11, I like Ole Miss to win by at least 12. So
Could definitely see it either way.
Yeah, for sure. I do think that's the only thing I feel pretty good about. I want to see what the over-under is before the end of the week, because that's got to be high for that game. Those two teams, I'd assume it's somewhere in the 60s or 70s.
Yeah, we probably won't know it until
Later
I would
on.
say Thursday or Friday, and they'll probably change before kickoff anyway. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so we'll finish up with probably one of the better games of the week with Arkansas and Florida. I touched on it earlier. Arkansas is 17.5-point underdogs. The matchup predictor on ESPN has Florida at 90% to win. I'm gonna have to agree with that. I do think Florida puts up a lot of points, and I mean a lot of points. But on the flip side of that, I think Arkansas does the same. I think this is, like you were talking about with South Carolina and Ole Miss, I think this is a game that could reach 70 or 80 points. Because Arkansas is just, they're on a roll. Like, they should have beat Auburn, and then they lost to Georgia beginning of the year, and then they lost to Texas A&M. So, I mean, they got screwed out of a win at Auburn. They got beat by a top 10 team and beat by another arguably top 10 team. So, for those reasons, I like Arkansas to keep this close in a shootout, but I do think Florida's able to come out on top just because Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts are just tearing through every defense they play right now.
Yeah, I think everyone thinks the same as we do on this one. I think Florida should win this game. I think they know now, like, hey, we're sitting in the spot to potentially get to the SEC championship. We've got the brightest spot in the East. I think they know that, and I think they know that going into the game as well as the rest of the season. I'm with you. I think Arkansas is going to put up some points. I don't know if it's going to be as high as you may think it may or it will be, but I definitely think there's going to be points on the board. But ultimately, I think Florida's going to win this one.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. Arkansas, I think they do cover that plus that 17.5 is a lot, especially coming off the last game Florida had. And Arkansas has not played bad all season. So I think that they do cover. Florida does win the game, though. I don't think they lose a game like that. No way.
Yeah, Florida's just so hot offensively. I think the only SEC defense that could stop them would be Alabama. You look at the rest of their schedule, Tennessee's not going to stop them. Like, there's just no game out there that I look at and I'm like, okay, Florida's going to lose or could possibly lose that game other than the SEC championship. So I think they're going to find themselves in a New Year's Six bowl, if not the playoffs. But nonetheless, is there any other game this week that you guys are interested in watching or think that we should keep an eye on?
I've got one right here. I put 3 stars beside it. 3 Ohio State at Maryland. I don't, I think Ohio State's going to win this game, or I should say I know that they're going to win this game, but I'm not going to sleep on it because I think Maryland is that team this year that, in recent years you've seen like Iowa and whoever else came and beat Ohio State. I think Maryland has looked good. I don't think they should win this game, Maryland, but they can. But Ohio State would definitely have to play super sloppy, a lot of turnovers, which I don't think they will do. But I'm not going to sleep on it.
Yeah, but with what Matthew said about that game, so right now they're giving Ohio State 25.5 on the road at Maryland. I don't see any reason Ohio State covers that. Maryland can score. Talia has been playing really, really good. I think Mike Locksley, they seem to fit really good. He jumped right into it. Rutgers put up 20, I think 27 last week against Ohio State. And Rutgers, I don't think, I mean, that quarterback they have is a transfer from Nebraska. So, I mean, I've got some questions with Ohio State's defense. 25, I think Maryland they can make that a game. They can
Yeah.
absolutely make that a game, but I don't see them winning. No, it'd be a lot more fun if they did. They
Yeah.
did start winning that game. I did write a note by another game too. Well, here, Matthew, if you got something to add, go for it.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say Ohio State, it could be one of those games that I think, Ohio State plays it close, 13-20, 21-17 something. And like the last 5 minutes of the game, Ohio State will win, come in and score like 2 or 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, okay, before we move on, Maryland was actually 25.5-point underdogs last week, too. And they were able
Really?
to cover that.
Wow.
Yeah. So, like you said, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, obviously Talia went to Alabama probably because of Tua and his family and all that.
Yeah.
Was Locksley the quarterback coach / offense coordinator that recruited him there, or was it the year prior or after?
I thought he was the guy who had recruited Talia.
That's
Yeah, I
what
did too.
that's
I
what
thought
I'm
he could.
thinking.
Yeah,
So
and
it makes sense that that's where he transferred. A lot of people thought that
Yeah,
Jalen was
yeah.
going to transfer up there. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm a big fan of that too. But Cade, you said you had another game that you were keeping an eye on.
Another game, we were just talking about teams coming off big wins. Notre Dame is playing at Boston College Saturday. I don't know if Boston College will win that game. Their offense has been kind of lame, but I've actually tuned into a lot of Boston College games just because I've been betting on them. They've got a good defense. They can play a good game against them. So I would actually look for Notre Dame there, especially after this win. They're number 2 now. If they come out a little sloppy, Boston College can make that a game with their defense.
Yeah,
Boston.
they barely lost to North Carolina and Clemson both. So,
Mhm.
I think they could definitely give them some trouble. Notre Dame could be on that high horse right now. I don't know. I've read some comments, some things Chip Kelly said, and he's definitely high on the team this year. We know what's happened when he's like that in recent years, but I'm not going to take anything away from him. Last week was huge. I think they proved that they're a top 5 team for sure in this year's season. But I'm gonna have to agree with you. I think Boston College could give them a scare for sure.
Yeah, I'm 100% on that. Obviously they gave a scare to Clemson. The only, Matt, you touched on their loss to Clemson and North Carolina both being very close. They kind of choked against North Carolina, in my opinion, and obviously choked against Clemson. But their only concerning loss is the 40-14 loss to Virginia Tech. But I will say Pete Jerkovic, their Boston College quarterback, has 4 interceptions on the year. Let me make sure. Yeah, he's got a 15-4 touchdown to interception stat line. 2 out of those 4 came in that game against Virginia Tech. So I think if he's able to hang on to the football and not turn the ball over, then yeah, I agree. I do think they would give Notre Dame a run for their money. I think if Notre Dame wins it, they win it in the same fashion that Clemson did, where they pull away late and then win by possibly 2 scores.
Yeah, Notre Dame had a big win this past week, but I mean, I've watched them play like they start slow. They seem to start slow every game. It kind of feels like that they kind of mosey through the first 30 minutes or so, and then okay, they pulled out at the end. But if Boston College can be in that game, they're going to have a chance with it. I want to see how Notre Dame handles it after the biggest win they've had in the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. My final game that I want to keep an eye on is Georgia and Missouri. Missouri kind of got a little bit of a hot hand there before they went into their bye week. I think they may have had a game postponed. They did. They had Vanderbilt was postponed.
Yep.
So they beat LSU, then had a postponed game. Then they beat Kentucky by 10, where their defense played really well. They hit a wall against Florida as expected. But I think they're playing up against a vulnerable Georgia team this week. You don't know what their quarterback situation is going to look like. Neither quarterback played well last week. Stetson Bennett really hasn't played well since Auburn, and he didn't really play great that game. Their run game kind of carried them there. But I think Georgia could be on back-to-back loss alert. I like Missouri. I think it's going to be a very close game, and I wouldn't be surprised if they come out on top in that one.
Yeah, I also had Stars beside that game, so I definitely agree with you there. It's tough to say for Georgia. That they could watch their whole season fall apart for sure, but I'd hate to see it happen because it kind of takes away from Florida's big win in terms of playoff talk towards the end of the season. But nonetheless, back to Missouri and Georgia, definitely one I'm going to keep an eye on.
But yeah, so I think that about wraps it up. BYU's got a bye this week. Cincinnati should win very handily. Marshall plays UMass, who I believe Coastal Carolina plays maybe later on in the year. Let's see. Liberty plays Virginia Tech. We talked about that game. Coastal Carolina should have an easy win. Where's it at? I'm on the wrong week. I'm on week 10. So sorry. Marshall plays Middle Tennessee. Coastal Carolina plays Troy. Liberty plays Western Carolina. And then, yeah, I mean, the rest of the games should be blowouts. You got Texas A&M at Tennessee, USC at Arizona, Alabama, LSU, Northwestern at Purdue. That may be a game to keep an eye on. Cade, you looking at that one?
Yeah.
Or?
Northwestern Purdue. Yeah, that's what I was doing. I was scrolling through a little bit more trying to find other ones. So Auburn is off this weekend.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. Yeah, Northwestern Purdue. Northwestern seems pretty good, honestly. Like they didn't even look that good against us, but I mean they started the season off. They beat Maryland by 40. They started off week 1, beat them 43-3. I think Maryland, it's the same old thing. Pat Fitzgerald's teams are going to be physical and they're going to play good defense. Rondell Moore with Purdue. I don't see why Northwestern doesn't win that game. Line's kind of low though. It's only 3.
Is Rondell Moore
right here,
playing?
I didn't think so. I thought he
I
had
don't think he
still
is.
opted out. I thought he had opted out still.
He opted back in, but then
they couldn't.
I guess decided he didn't want to play. I don't know what happened with that, but yeah, I was excited to see him and Rashad Bateman this year because I believe both of them got hurt last year and missed majority of the year, or maybe 2018. But nonetheless, I was very excited to see both of those receivers back, and then I saw where Rondell Moore was like not practicing. I was like, well, why would you opt back in and then opt out without making it public? But I guess he's kind of taking the Colin Hill route with Mississippi State, where he just quit showing up and didn't tell anybody. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of what it seems like.
But yeah, so anything else y'all want to talk about before we wrap up episode 9?
I think we about covered it all.
I guess does anybody have their top 4, what they think the end, or is that too far ahead?
I think you have to
as
go.
Of now, I've got the same 3: Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and then I'm going to throw Notre Dame in there at the 3 or 4 spots. So other than those 3, I think it doesn't really differ much than last week.
Yeah, I agree. I've got Alabama going to get in at 1. I got Ohio State going to get in at 2. Clemson will win the ACC championship. They'll slip up to number 3, and then I think if Notre Dame's only loss is to Clemson in the ACC championship, they get in at 4. I think if they lose, then you're probably looking at Texas A&M slipping in at number 4. So I think it's between Texas A&M and Notre Dame, unless Florida is able to win the SEC.
Cincinnati too. Cincinnati could slip in.
I'd love to
Florida
see
wins the SEC. That's what I was about to say. If Florida wins the SEC, I don't know what happens. Because if it stays how it is now, Alabama's 1, Florida jumps up to 5 or 4, and then they beat Alabama. I'm not really sure what the playoffs would do then. Say Clemson does beat Notre Dame the second time they play. That'd be a mess. But yeah, I would say because where A&M's at, if A&M wins out, they're going to be in a good spot. But if they do slip up somewhere down the road, and then Bama beats Florida, we could be looking at that argument at the end where you got Notre Dame with 1 loss, and then you got BYU, Cincinnati undefeated, and we got to pick one of those teams. It's possible it could end up at that.
Well, I mean, you're looking at a scenario where we'll say Alabama and Ohio State run the table, go undefeated. You could have 1 loss Clemson, 1 loss Notre Dame, 1 loss A&M, 2 loss Florida, and then undefeated Cincinnati and BYU all fighting for a 4 spot. So
Yeah.
I'll finish with this, Cade, while we have you on here. Me and Matthew talked about it a little bit last week, but to wrap up the show, does the committee have the format correct? Should it be a 14 playoff, or do you think it should be 6 or 8 or 16?
Ooh, I would like to see 8. I think 8 would be pretty good. I think if they do it the right way. I don't want it to get to where it's like NFL, where there's some teams making the playoffs and you're like, why are they even out there? But if they'd
Yeah.
go, yeah, like the NFC East doesn't deserve a playoff team this year. There's no argument there. They shouldn't be in the playoffs. Don't matter who comes out. But like if it could go, I guess my only issue would be is I want to see at least every power conference have a chance at it. But I mean, as we've seen, it doesn't look like they deserve it. But I feel like if you're going to go to where we at least give everyone a power conference, like those 5 votes, and I'd like to see at least the 3 extra, and have the one at large for BYU, Cincinnati, whoever comes out of those 2 teams. I think they should take like the highest rank, and then the 2 at larges. Like I don't think this year an 18 playoff would be pretty entertaining. If you looked at it how it was now, we could have BYU, Cincinnati, Florida, and A&M, or maybe Miami in it, Indiana. I think that could be really fun. But I guess 4 makes it matter more, and I completely get that. Like the regular season argument, it makes every game
Yeah, I
matter
agree.
way more, and I understand that. I'm kind of torn on them. 6 doesn't sound horrible if you maybe did 1 and 2 buys, and then the other 4 teams played up to go to a chance at a semifinal spot. But 8's my limit. I wouldn't go past 8 with college football. No way.
Yeah. Definitely think 8's the limit.
Yeah, Kate, I'll say this. I agree that I think the 14 playoff does make the regular season matter a lot more, like you said. But I think when it comes to expanding the playoff, it comes down to TV value. Like you don't want to see Alabama play Miami in the first round of the playoffs, like 1-8. Like
Yeah.
that's not going to be a good game. Everybody knows that's not going to be a good game. So in the scenario like that, you shouldn't. A lot of people are going to be against expanding for that reason. So for that reason, I'm more in favor of a 16 playoff where you have Alabama just for this year, for instance, Alabama and Ohio State would have a bye, and then you get Notre Dame plays Cincinnati, Clemson plays Texas A&M. Those are going to be 2 really good, entertaining games. And then the winners go and play to where when the second round you get Alabama, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Clemson. Like let's see, it would be 2, 4, all 5 games in that instance would be very entertaining to watch. Suppose if you get to where you go in to a 7-game playoff, total games, I think that then you have a couple blowouts like Alabama, Michigan State a couple years ago where no one wants to watch it, and you kind of know the outcome before the game even happens. So.
Yep.
Yeah. That's funny, man. Me and Carson actually drove out to Dallas to watch that 2015 Bama Michigan State playoff game. That was a terrible game, driving all the way out there for that.
It would have been fun to go to, though, for us at least.
That was fun. It was fun to go out there.
Yeah.
It was fun to go out there.
But yeah, well, that should wrap up episode 9. Kate, I'm sure we'll probably be having you back on maybe close to the playoffs, because I think we could all have a fairly good debate slash conversation regarding the top 4 teams in college football. But so we appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you hanging out with us for the past hour and a half.
Yeah,
And,
thanks, guys. This is fun.
Yeah, so that'll wrap up for episode 9. Probably going to get an episode out later this week for NFL. Matt, that's the plan. We good with that?
Yeah. I was going to say, too, real quick, Cade, join us for an NFL one. I know being a
I'll
Chiefs
come
fan,
on.
it'll be
Oh,
fun
yeah.
to talk about. So
I'll
have to have
come
you on.
for sure. I'll come do some NFL talks too, guys. Yeah, just let me know. I'm down.
Maybe we do it where we have a weekly guest instead of just an episode guest. So if you want to come on, make sure you're educated in both. You can't be educated in one or the other. That's the new rule.
Got
But
it.
So but yeah, Kate, thanks for hanging out with us, man. We really appreciate it. Hope whenever you're back here in Alabama, surely we can hang out, maybe watch some Red Zone one day or something. Depending
Hell
on
yeah,
what
guys.
else is
I'll
going
hit
on.
y'all up for sure.
But yeah, so thank you guys for
I'll-
tuning in. And like I said, we really appreciate it. We've had insane growth over the last couple of weeks. Had a video hit 2,300 views, another one hit 100. That's our 2 highest videos we've ever had. Twitter's growing a little bit. Subscriber count's going up. So we really appreciate it. Be sure to check out our apparel as well. It's linked in the description below. We got Matthews finishing up NFL apparel. We have Respect the Raid apparel for you Air Raid guys. And then if there's something that you guys want that we don't have, just send me a message and I'm sure we can get it to you in a very timely manner. But nonetheless, NFL podcast out later this week. This will be going up today, Tuesday, technically. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. Be sure to follow us on social media. Follow Cade on Twitter for his hot takes. I'll link his description in the below. You have mine and Matthews. And, of course, follow us at TPA Podcast _. It's been fun, and we appreciate you guys tuning in. See you on Thursday or Friday.